When I moved in with my daughter, I thought I was finally coming home. The smell of her cinnamon coffee, the sound of my grandson's laughter, it felt like family again. But a week later, she slid a thick binder across the kitchen table. Page after page was titled House Rules, and almost every sentence started with my name. I wasn't Mom anymore. I was Margaret, the temporary resident. I didn't argue. I signed every page with a smile, because what my daughter didn't know was that I had been quietly collecting something far more powerful than her rules. I was 62 when I packed the last of my belongings into 2 medium-sized suitcases. My old house, filled with decades of memories, had been sold. The money cleared some old medical bills from when Richard, my husband, got sick. The rest I tucked away, a modest cushion for my retirement. I told myself this was a new chapter. Anna, my only daughter, had been the one to suggest it. "Mom, you shouldn't live alone anymore. Come stay with us. It'll be easier for everyone," she'd said over the phone, her voice brisk but affectionate. I wanted to believe she meant it. The day I arrived at her suburban home, sunlight spilled across the wide driveway. The front lawn was neat, with flower beds carefully arranged, so like Anna to keep things in order. When she opened the door, she gave me a hug that was warm, if a bit quick. My grandson, Oliver, ran to me shouting, "Grandma, you're here!" And I felt my chest swell with something close to joy. That first week was everything I thought I'd been missing. Mornings with the smell of cinnamon coffee drifting from the kitchen. Evenings filled with chatter around the dinner table. Oliver would slip into my room at night with a book he wanted me to read. I told myself this was how family was supposed to feel. Anna seemed genuinely happy to have me there. She set me up in the guest room upstairs. "You'll have your own space," she said. The room was smaller than my old bedroom, but it was cozy. My suitcases fit neatly in the closet. There was a quilt on the bed that looked like one she'd had since college. Still, there were small details that felt slightly different from how I'd imagined. On the second day, Anna mentioned offhandedly, "Oh, and Mom, just remember, this is temporary, okay? I mean, until we figure out the best arrangement." She smiled as she said it, so I laughed along, telling myself she was just being practical. In the evenings, I noticed she sometimes scribbled notes in a little notebook. At first, I assumed they were work reminders. Anna was always busy with her marketing job. But then, one afternoon, I glanced over her shoulder and saw my name written in neat block letters at the top of a page. Underneath it were bullet points. Wake-up time, 6:30 a.m. Kitchen use, after breakfast. I asked her jokingly, "Keeping tabs on me?" She laughed. "No, Mom, I just want to make sure we keep things running smoothly. It's all about making life comfortable for you and for us." I let it go. She'd always been organized. Maybe this was just her way of making everyone's lives easier. The third night, during dinner, she said it again. "This is just until you get settled, Mom. We'll figure things out later." She smiled, serving herself mashed potatoes, and I nodded, telling myself she didn't mean anything by it. I tried to focus on the good parts. We had family dinners almost every night. I took Oliver to the park a few times a week. Anna and her husband, Mark, seemed busy but polite. There were moments, brief ones, when I truly felt part of the household. Still, the little things kept piling up. Anna would rearrange my toiletries in the bathroom without mentioning it. She'd comment, "Mom, maybe don't cook heavy meals. It's better for your health." Always in that light, casual tone, as if she were doing me a favor. One Saturday morning, I came into the kitchen and saw a sticky note on the fridge. In neat handwriting, it read, "Mom, please remember to wash your dishes immediately after breakfast. Thanks." I smiled at the note, but inside I felt an odd chill. It wasn't a request so much as a reminder of my place. Whenever a tiny suspicion surfaced, Anna would do something to smooth it over. She'd invite me to watch a movie with her. She'd bring me a slice of pie from the bakery she knew I loved. It worked. Each time, I convinced myself I was overthinking. The truth was, I didn't want to believe anything could be wrong. I had given up my home, my independence, because I trusted her. I needed this to work. In those early weeks, the balance felt delicate. I sensed a quiet undercurrent, something unspoken, but I pushed it away. This was my daughter, my family. Surely there was no reason to think I wasn't truly welcome. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when Anna knocked on my bedroom door. She had a smile on her face, the kind that felt a little too rehearsed. "Mom, do you have a minute? I have something I'd like us to go over," she said. I followed her downstairs into the kitchen, expecting maybe a conversation about groceries or Oliver's school schedule. But there, on the table, was a thick binder, 5 crisp pages clipped together neatly on top. Across the cover in bold letters, "House Rules." I felt a flicker of confusion. "House rules? For who?" I asked, half joking. "For all of us," Anna said brightly. "It just makes things easier when everyone knows what's expected. I drafted a few guidelines so we can avoid misunderstandings." As I flipped the first page, my eyes caught on the very first sentence. "Margaret shall refrain from using the kitchen after 8 p.m. The next rule, Margaret must notify Anna at least 24 hours in advance if she plans to have visitors. By the 3rd, Margaret will ensure laundry is done on Wednesdays only to avoid schedule conflicts. My name appeared in almost every line. It wasn't Mom or Mother, it was Margaret. Each sentence was as formal as if she were writing a workplace policy. I looked up at her, waiting for the punchline, but her expression stayed steady, her pen poised in her hand. "Is this a joke?" I asked. She shook her head. "Not at all. It's just about making sure we're all comfortable. You know how households can get messy when boundaries aren't clear." There were a few rules that seemed reasonable: keeping the shared spaces tidy, being mindful of noise late at night. But buried among them were clauses that tightened around me like invisible chains. Margaret will store personal items only in her assigned room. Margaret will avoid extended stays in the living room during evening hours. Margaret will refrain from making significant household purchases without prior discussion. I stared at the neat bullet points, each one a tiny line that redefined my role in this house. Anna tapped the pen lightly against the paper. "It's just a signature, Mom. This way, we all know what to expect. It's better for everyone." The words sank in slowly, like cold water creeping under a door. I thought of my home, the one I sold, the place where she grew up. There had never been a binder full of rules for her. "I guess if it makes things easier," I murmured. My hand felt heavy as I signed each page. Anna's smile brightened, relieved. "Perfect. This will keep everything smooth. Thanks, Mom." She slipped the binder into a drawer and started making coffee as if nothing unusual had happened. I stood there, trying to ignore the quiet knot forming in my stomach. That afternoon, I busied myself with small chores, but the binder weighed on my thoughts. The wording had been so precise, so careful. It wasn't just a list of preferences, it was a record. At dinner that evening, Anna acted as though nothing had changed. Mark talked about a project at work. Oliver chattered about a science experiment at school. Anna laughed, passing me the mashed potatoes as though the binder had never existed. For a moment, I convinced myself maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe this was just her way of preventing arguments. After all, families had misunderstandings all the time. "Mom, could you pass the salt?" Anna asked, smiling as she refilled my glass of water. I passed it to her, studying her face. There was nothing in her tone, nothing in her eyes that hinted at tension. She even asked about my knitting project, listening intently while Oliver leaned against my arm. Later that night, I heard her humming softly in the kitchen as she loaded the dishwasher. I went to bed telling myself things were fine, but lying in bed, I couldn't shake the memory of my name, printed so formally at the top of every page. Over the next few days, life resumed its routine. I followed the rules without complaint. I kept my laundry to Wednesdays. I avoided the kitchen after 8. I refrained from having guests, not that I had many to invite. Anna seemed pleased. She even brought home my favorite scones one morning. "Thought you might like these," she said cheerfully. It almost felt normal again. Almost. Each time I glanced toward the kitchen drawer where the binder rested, I felt a faint tension coil tighter inside me. At Sunday dinner, Anna raised her glass. "Here's to smooth sailing," she said lightly. Mark chuckled. "No complaints here." They both smiled at me, and I smiled back, even as a quiet thought whispered in the back of my mind. Smooth for who? It started with an offhand comment from Mrs. Callahan, the neighbor across the street. We were standing in her front yard one afternoon, watching Oliver ride his bike up and down the sidewalk. "Anna's lucky to have you here helping out," she said, adjusting her sun hat. "I suppose it's nice having a guest who pulls her weight." I blinked. "A guest?" She smiled kindly, unaware of the chill that had crept into my chest. "Oh, you know what I mean. She mentioned it when we were chatting the other day, that you're staying for a while until you find your own place." I forced a polite laugh, but my stomach tightened. Guest. The word rattled in my mind long after I waved goodbye and crossed the street. That evening, while setting the table for dinner, I heard Anna on the phone in the living room. Her voice was light, casual, but the words caught my attention. "Yes, the room arrangement is working out fine," she said. "It's temporary. Once everything's settled, we'll revisit the plan." Room arrangement, temporary. I stood frozen for a moment, my hands still on the silverware. It felt as though I was standing just outside a door that had quietly closed without me noticing. The next clue came 2 days later. Anna had stepped out to pick up Oliver from soccer practice, leaving her laptop open on the kitchen counter. I told myself I wasn't snooping. I just went to close the lid so it wouldn't overheat. But then my eyes landed on an open email draft addressed to a loan officer. "Margaret is a temporary resident with no legal tenancy or occupancy rights to the property. This arrangement is for personal family support purposes only." The words were like a punch to the chest. No legal tenancy. No occupancy rights. I backed away from the laptop, my heart pounding. It wasn't just a binder of rules anymore, it was official language. Words meant to be read by lawyers, banks, maybe even a court. The binder wasn't just about smooth sailing. It was about establishing boundaries on paper, boundaries that kept me outside of anything permanent. That night at dinner, I barely tasted the food. Anna chatted about work, Oliver talked about his school project, and I smiled at all the right times. Inside, my thoughts swirled like a storm cloud. Over the next week, I began to watch more carefully. I noticed how Anna always kept her office door shut now, even when she was just making phone calls. I noticed the way she locked the drawer in the kitchen where the binder was stored. Mark didn't seem to know much. He greeted me politely, but stayed busy. One afternoon, while Anna was at a meeting, I found myself standing outside her office door. The brass handle was cold under my hand. My heart raced as I turned it. It was locked. I should have walked away. But something in me, the part that had signed those pages with a smile, had shifted. I wasn't just her mother living under her roof anymore. I was someone with questions that deserved answers. The opportunity came the following Thursday. Anna left in a hurry for an early appointment, and in her rush, she forgot to lock the office. I hesitated for a long moment before stepping inside. The room smelled faintly of citrus polish and printer ink. Papers were neatly stacked on the desk. On top of one stack was a folder marked Mortgage and Insurance. I opened it. Inside were documents detailing a second mortgage taken out on the house just a few months before I moved in. The bank statements showed a significant lump sum, part of the down payment, coming directly from the sale of my old home. Page after page, I read, my hands tightening around the paper. My name wasn't listed anywhere as an owner or co-signer. In the insurance documents, there was another line that made my breath catch. Occupant status. Temporary guest. Family. No legal liability. I sat down in Anna's chair, the room spinning slightly. It was all so careful, so deliberate. The The binder, the phrasing to neighbors, the emails, it all pointed to one truth. This wasn't just about boundaries. It was about keeping me out of anything that could tie me to the property in a meaningful way. I closed the folder, my fingers trembling. A hot wave of anger rushed through me, not the kind that makes you shout, but the kind that makes you silent, cold, and very, very clear. That evening, Anna was cheerful at dinner, chattering about Oliver's school fundraiser. I listened, nodding, my mind already shifting into a different mode. I knew now what she was doing, and I knew I couldn't let it stand. The rules, the careful language, the exclusions, they weren't just annoyances. They were part of a strategy, and I was about to create one of my own. The next discovery came by accident, or maybe it wasn't an accident at all. I had begun paying attention to every slip of paper that came through the house. Anna was usually careful, but one afternoon a letter from her insurance provider arrived while she was out. The envelope was marked confidential. I shouldn't have opened it, but my name was printed in the address block under hers. Curiosity, or maybe instinct, won. Inside was a health insurance policy renewal. My eyes scanned the pages until they stopped cold on a section titled Household Composition. Under occupants, it listed Margaret Johnson, temporary resident, non-dependent. That wasn't what stopped my breath. What did was the next note. Occupancy classification ensures premium reduction and exempts property from additional tax liability. I read it again, slower this time. Anna had declared me as a temporary occupant for her health insurance, reducing her premiums. She had also avoided a property tax adjustment that might apply if I were a legal co-resident. The binder, the conversations, the email to the bank. And now this. It all aligned into a neat, deliberate pattern. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't just boundaries. This was a strategy to use my presence for her benefit while keeping me firmly outside any legal standing. If I were officially a permanent resident, the entire arrangement, insurance discounts, tax benefits, and her carefully balanced finances would start to unravel. I sat at the kitchen table with the letter in my lap, a sick wave of betrayal washing over me. That night at dinner, Anna smiled as though nothing in the world was wrong. She asked if I wanted more salad, chatted about Oliver's upcoming recital, and laughed when Mark made a joke about the weather. I smiled back, but something inside me had gone cold. The anger I felt wasn't the hot shouting kind. It was the deep, quiet kind, the kind that builds pressure. Every smile she gave me, every sweet word now felt like another layer of calculation. I knew one thing. I couldn't just confront her in the kitchen. That would turn into a messy argument, my word against hers. No, if I was going to address this, I needed to do it in a way she couldn't twist. The following morning, while Anna was at work and Oliver was at school, I picked up the phone and called a local attorney. His name was Daniel Carter, recommended by Mrs. Callahan, though she didn't know the reason I was asking. Mrs. Johnson, he said after I explained the basics. If you contributed funds to the purchase of the house, you may have more than just occupancy rights. Depending on the documentation, you could have an equitable interest in the property itself. The words sank in, slowly. An interest in the property? Yes. If you can show that your money was used toward the purchase or mortgage, you may be entitled to a portion of the home's value. And even if you don't pursue ownership, your occupancy rights as a family member are stronger than what she's representing. I sat quietly for a moment, the weight of what he'd said settling in. Anna had tried to make me invisible on paper, but my presence and my contribution were not so easily erased. Daniel agreed to meet me later that week. He told me to bring any documents I had, receipts from my house sale, records of transfers, anything that connected my money to this home. Back at the house, I began gathering everything I could find, old bank statements, the closing documents from my house sale, even an email from Anna thanking me for helping make this new place possible. Each paper felt like a brick in a foundation I hadn't realized I was building. As I organized the documents, a strange calm began to settle over me. The anger was still there, but now it had a shape, a purpose. In the evenings, I acted as though nothing had changed. I asked Anna about her work. I praised Oliver's piano practice. I even baked cookies with him for the school fundraiser. But every time I smiled at Anna, I imagined the moment I would place my evidence on the table. Calm, undeniable, impossible for her to brush aside. The plan took form in my mind like a carefully drawn map. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't accuse. I would wait for the right moment, the one she'd never see coming. And when it came, the rules wouldn't be hers anymore. I chose a Thursday evening. Anna had just wrapped up a big project at work, and Mark was in a rare good mood. I told them I wanted to cook dinner as a thank you for letting me stay. The words tasted strange in my mouth, but Anna beamed. "That sounds lovely, Mom. What's the occasion?" "Oh, nothing special," I said, my voice light, "just feeling grateful." All afternoon I prepared the meal. Roast chicken, her favorite garlic mashed potatoes, Oliver's favorite biscuits. The smell filled the kitchen, and for a few hours everything felt almost like the early days. When they came to the table, I greeted them warmly. Mark poured wine, Anna complimented the food, and we all settled in. I let the conversation flow easily, Mark talking about work, Anna sharing a story about Oliver's school play. I waited until dessert. When the plates were cleared, I reached under my chair and brought out a neatly bound folder. The cover page read, in large bold letters, "House Rules Revised Edition." Anna laughed softly, clearly amused. "Oh, Mom, are you making your own rules now?" "In a way," I said, smiling. "I thought it might be fun to add a few updates. For clarity." She opened the folder. The first page looked like a table of contents, but when she turned to the second page, her smile froze. It wasn't rules, it was a copy of the mortgage documents, highlighting the payment that came from the sale of my old home. The next page showed insurance statements with my name listed as a temporary resident, alongside a printout of the tax codes that applied to permanent residents. Further down was the email to the bank, in which she declared I had no legal tenancy. At the bottom of the stack was a letter from my lawyer confirming my equitable interest in the property and my rights as an occupant. The color drained from her face. Mark leaned forward, his brows knitting. "Anna, what is all this?" she stammered, flipping the pages back and forth. It's just, Mom, this is out of context." "It's all in context," I said, my voice calm but steady. "Every page, every word. I just thought we should be clear about expectations, since we're so big on rules." Mark turned to Anna, confusion giving way to something harder. "You never told me about this money from your mom, or the insurance thing?" Anna's mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. The room felt tight with silence. I let it stretch just long enough. "I'm not here to fight," I said finally, my tone measured. "I'm not here to take your home. I'm not even here to undo what you've arranged. But I am here to make sure I'm treated like more than a guest in my daughter's life." Anna looked at me, her expression a mixture of panic and shame. "Mom, I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," I interrupted, but gently. "You meant every word, every page, every rule. But I'm not angry the way you think. I'm disappointed. And I'm done pretending I don't see what's right in front of me." Mark pushed his chair back slightly, rubbing his jaw. "Anna, this isn't right. You can't just—" He shook his head, looking at me. "Mrs. Johnson, what do you want to do?" I turned my gaze to Anna. "What I want is simple. I want the portion of the money I put into this house returned to me. And I want respect. No more binders. No more language that erases me from my own family." Anna swallowed hard. You don't want the house?" I shook my head. "No, this is your home. But I will not live under rules designed to push me out while my name and my money are still here in the walls." Mark looked between us, still stunned. That's more than fair. Anna's voice trembled. Mom, Save it, I said softly. You don't have to explain. Just do the right thing. The rest of dinner passed in silence. There were no more jokes, no more casual smiles. The air was heavy, but in a way, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. After they cleared the table, Anna excused herself to put Oliver to bed. Mark stayed behind, offering to help with the dishes. She didn't think you'd know, he said quietly, stacking plates. She thought she could keep it clean and simple. I'm sorry. I nodded. So am I, but sometimes people need to be reminded where the lines are. By the weekend, Anna had arranged the transfer of my share back to me. There was no celebration, no grand apology, just a quiet acknowledgement that the rules had changed. I accepted the check without ceremony. Anna avoided my eyes, but I didn't press. Some lessons don't need to be shouted. The check sat neatly in my purse, crisp and final. It wasn't the full value of what I had put into my daughter's house, but it was enough, a tangible acknowledgement that my role in the home had never been that of a guest. Within 2 weeks, I found a modest apartment downtown. It wasn't large, just a one-bedroom with a small balcony, but when I first stepped into the space, I felt something I hadn't in months: freedom. The walls were bare, but they were mine. Anna helped me move in. It was a quiet afternoon. No emotional speeches, just boxes and tape, and the occasional sound of Oliver's footsteps as he explored my new place. Anna carried in a box of dishes and set it on the counter. "This is nice, Mom," she said softly, glancing around. "It is," I agreed, arranging my books on the shelf. "It's simple, but it works for me." We didn't talk about the binder, or the rules, or the meeting at the dinner table. Some things didn't need to be rehashed. We both understood that this arrangement, separate but respectful, was the right choice. In the weeks that followed, I settled into a comfortable routine. I took long walks in the mornings, met neighbors in the building, and even joined a book club at the library. I visited Anna and Oliver on weekends, always leaving before dinner. Our relationship shifted into something calmer. There were no more clipped reminders, no more carefully worded temporary arrangements. When I visited, Anna treated me as a guest in the best sense, welcomed, respected, and appreciated, and I treated her home the same way, with care, but with boundaries. One Sunday afternoon, I was sitting on my balcony with a cup of tea when Anna called. "Mom, Oliver wants to invite you to his recital next month," she said. "Of course," I replied, smiling. She hesitated for a moment before adding, "And I wanted to say thank you for not taking more than you did." I let a quiet pause settle between us. "Anna, I never wanted your house. I just wanted my dignity. And now we both have what we need." She was silent for a moment, then sighed. "I'm glad you're happy where you are." "I am," I said, "and I'm glad we can talk like this." As spring turned to summer, the sharp edges of what had happened began to soften. We didn't erase the past, but we also didn't let it rule the present. Sometimes, when Oliver visited my apartment, he'd ask, "Grandma, why don't you live with us anymore?" I'd smile and say, "Because everyone needs their own space. It makes the time we spend together even better." He'd nod, accepting that answer without needing more. Looking back now, I see the months in Anna's house as a kind of quiet trial, not of love, because love was always there, but of boundaries. It's easy to think that family means no limits, no lines drawn. But the truth is, boundaries don't destroy relationships. They protect them. In my old house, I was the one who set the tone, who held the family together. Moving into Anna's home shifted that balance. For a while, it seemed like there was no room for me without rules. But I learned something important. Respect is not about space. It's about recognition. I had to fight for that recognition, not with anger, but with clarity. If there's one thing I want people to understand from my story, it's this. Generosity should never erase self-respect. When I signed Anna's binder of rules, I wasn't agreeing to be less than I was. I was waiting, watching, choosing the right moment to remind her who I am. Not just her mother, but a person with her own life, her own contributions, her own worth. And when that moment came, I didn't burn bridges. I built new ones, stronger than before. These days, I still see Anna and Oliver often. Our conversations are lighter. Our dinners are free of tension. We both know where the lines are, and we both know not to cross them. Sometimes I think back to that thick binder, the one that started it all. I wonder if Anna still has it tucked away somewhere. If she does, I hope she's added one more rule at the end. Respect is the foundation of every home.